Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive into the world of appraisals. We're looking at some recent guidelines from Fannie Mae today, and I have a feeling these are going to spark some interesting conversations. This deep dive is sourced by Chandra Mast, a general appraiser in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. You can connect with Chandra on LinkedIn if you want to follow up with her directly.
Always fascinating to see how Fannie Mae's guidelines shape the industry, and these updates are no exception. They really touch on some key aspects of appraisal practice.
All right, let's jump right in. One of the things that caught my eye was this emphasis on objective language in appraisal reports. It seems like Fannie Mae is cracking down on the use of code words, terms that might seem harmless on the surface but could potentially introduce bias.
Yeah, you're right, and it's something all appraisers need to be mindful of. Terms like desirable neighborhood or pride of ownership, while seemingly innocuous, can be interpreted in ways that perpetuate stereotypes or unfairly influence value.
Can you give us some specific examples of how these code words might play out in a real appraisal scenario?
Absolutely. Let's say you're appraising a home in a historically diverse neighborhood, using a phrase like desirable neighborhood without providing concrete data or context could be perceived as implying that the neighborhood is only desirable because of its changing demographics, which could be viewed as discriminatory.
Wow, I hadn't thought of it that way before. So how can appraisers avoid these pitfalls and ensure they're using truly objective language?
It's all about focusing on observable facts and data. Instead of saying, well-maintained, for example, you could specify the year the roof was replaced or detail recent upgrades based on factual information.
So it's about painting a clear picture with verifiable details rather than relying on subjective impressions. What's interesting is that this emphasis on objectivity seems to align with the increasing use of technology in appraisals, particularly with things like hybrid appraisals and automated valuation models.
That's a great observation. As we move towards a more data-driven approach, the language we use needs to be precise and unambiguous. It's not just about communicating clearly to other humans, it's also about ensuring that machines can accurately process and analyze the information.
That makes perfect sense. It's like we're preparing for a future where AI is an integral part of the appraisal process. Speaking of which, another significant update from Fannie Mae deals with the distinction between neighborhood and market area. I have to admit, I've always used these terms interchangeably, but it seems there's a more nuanced definition now.
You're not alone. Many people use these terms synonymously, but Fannie Mae is drawing a clearer line. A neighborhood is now defined as a group of complementary land uses, while a market area is the geographic region where most buyer demand and competition for a property are located.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Two houses could be located right next to each other in the same neighborhood, but their market areas could be completely different.
Exactly. Imagine two identical houses side by side. One might be situated closer to a highly sought-after school or have better access to public transportation. Those factors would significantly impact its market area, even though it's technically in the same neighborhood as the house next door.
It's fascinating. It's like real estate is getting its own hyper-specific dictionary. So for appraisers like Chandra, this means they need to be extra diligent in defining both the neighborhood and the market area for each property they assess.
Absolutely. And this distinction is crucial not only for accurately valuing properties, but also for ensuring fair lending practices.
Right.
By clearly defining the market area, appraisers can avoid unintentionally redlining or perpetuating bias based on geographic boundaries.
Now, shifting gears a bit, another important update from Fannie Mae deals with accurately reflecting market trends in appraisals. It seems like they're really pushing for appraisers to prioritize objective data and analysis over gut feelings or subjective judgments.
You're right. In a rapidly changing market, relying solely on intuition can lead to inaccurate valuations. Fannie Mae is urging appraisers to diligently track market trends, analyze comparable sales data, and make adjustments accordingly. They've even provided an illustration that walks through different market scenarios and the corresponding adjustments appraisers should consider.
So it's not just about looking at past sales, it's about understanding the current market trajectory and making informed adjustments based on data. Can you give us a real-world example of how this might play out?
Let's say you're appraising a house that sold for $500,000 6 months ago. In a rapidly rising market, that same house might be worth $525,000 today. Appraisers need to factor in these changes and make adjustments to reflect the current market value supported by comparable sales data.
It sounds like this requires a lot of vigilance on the part of appraisers. They need to be constantly monitoring the market and staying ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And this brings us to another significant update, the rise of hybrid appraisals. With hybrid appraisals, a property data collector gathers a lot of the on-site information, allowing the appraiser to focus more on the valuation analysis.
So it's kind of like a division of labor. One person handles the data collection, and the appraiser digs into the numbers and market analysis. I can see how that would be more efficient, especially in a fast-paced market.
Right, and it allows appraisers to leverage their expertise where it's most valuable in analyzing the data and making those nuanced judgments about value.
But I imagine some appraisers might be hesitant about this shift. It's a big change to rely on someone else for that crucial on-site data collection.
You're absolutely right. There are concerns about data accuracy and reliability when you're not the one physically inspecting the property.
So how is Fannie Mae addressing those concerns? How are they assuring appraisers that the data they're receiving is accurate and trustworthy?
Well, they've done their homework. They've conducted extensive analysis to demonstrate the reliability of their property data collection process. They looked at 4 key areas. First, data consistency, comparing data collected by property data collectors to data from previous appraisals on the same properties. Things like gross living area and lot size aligned within 10% in the vast majority of cases.
Okay, so that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
What about the other areas they analyzed?
They also examined insights from their Loan Quality Center, which focuses on identifying potential loan defects. They found that the defect rates were practically identical between appraisals using property data collections and traditional appraisals.
So from a quality control standpoint, both methods are performing equally well. What were the other 2 areas of analysis?
They looked at appraisal performance using their collateral underwriter system. Risk scores and flags were very similar between traditional and hybrid appraisals, again suggesting that data reliability isn't a major issue. And finally, loan performance tracking, things like delinquency rates, and found no significant difference between loans using hybrid appraisals and those using traditional appraisals.
Wow, they really covered all the bases. It sounds like Fannie Mae is putting a lot of effort into making sure these hybrid appraisals are reliable and accurate. But what about those exceptional cases where an appraiser might find errors in the data or have trouble validating it? What kind of safeguards are in place?
That's where the Uniform Property Dataset, or UPD, comes in. This dataset defines exactly what data needs to be collected and provided to the appraiser, ensuring consistency and clarity.
Okay, so everyone's working from the same playbook, so to speak. But what about the appraiser's liability? If they're relying on data collected by someone else, what happens if something goes wrong?
That's a valid concern, and Fannie Mae has addressed it with something called Limiting Condition 3 in the hybrid appraisal form.
Can you break that down for us? What does that condition actually do?
Essentially, it protects appraisers from liability related to the property data. It acknowledges that the appraisers is relying on information provided by a third party and states that they've used their best judgment to ensure the data's reliability.
So it's like a safety net for appraisers in this new landscape. But it sounds like Fannie Mae is really pushing for wider adoption of hybrid appraisals. I'm curious, what are some of the potential benefits they see in this shift?
Well, one of the biggest benefits is efficiency. By streamlining the data collection process, appraisers can focus more on the valuation analysis, which could potentially lead to faster turnaround times.
That makes sense, especially in today's competitive market where speed is often of the essence. Are there any other advantages?
Hybrid appraisals could also help address the ongoing appraiser shortage. By freeing up appraisers from some of the more time-consuming tasks, they could potentially take on more assignments, increasing capacity within the industry.
So it's a win-win. More efficient appraisals and potentially more appraisers available to handle the workload. But this shift towards hybrid appraisals also seems to place more responsibility on lenders.
You're absolutely right. Lenders now have a much bigger role in ensuring that appraisals meet all the necessary requirements and comply with fair lending laws.
So what are some of the specific responsibilities that lenders now have?
Well, for one, they're now required to have policies and procedures in place to actively monitor appraisals for any prohibited language.
So they can't just take the appraiser's word for it anymore. They need to be actively involved in the review process, making sure everything is above board.
Exactly. They need to be checking for any subjective or potentially discriminatory language, even seemingly innocent phrases that could raise red flags.
It sounds like this is really shifting the dynamic between lenders and appraisers, creating a more collaborative and oversight-focused relationship. And it all circles back to that emphasis on objectivity and data-driven decision-making that we discussed earlier.
Yeah, it really does feel like a sea change in the industry. And it makes me wonder, given all these changes, how do you see the role of the appraiser evolving in the future?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think it's safe to say that the appraiser's role is becoming increasingly specialized and data-driven.
So maybe less about physically inspecting every nook and cranny and more about analyzing data spotting trends and really understanding the nuances of the market.
Precisely. I think we'll see appraisers becoming even more like detectives, piecing together evidence from various sources, market data, property data, economic trends, to arrive at a well-supported valuation.
And having the tech skills to navigate these new tools and platforms, absolutely, technology is going to be key. And it's not just about crunching numbers, it's about using technology to communicate more effectively, to collaborate with clients and lenders, and to stay ahead of the curve in a rapidly changing landscape.
It's exciting to think about all the possibilities,
Hmm.
but at its core, it still comes down to providing accurate and unbiased valuations.
You're absolutely right. These guidelines from Fannie Mae, these shifts in technology and practice, they're all ultimately about upholding those core principles of accuracy and fairness.
Well, Chandra, I think you're armed with a wealth of information to navigate these changes and continue providing top-notch appraisals. Thanks so much for letting us deep dive into your source material today. For our listeners, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this evolving landscape, so feel free to connect with us on social media and continue the conversation.
It's been a pleasure joining you on this deep dive.
And until next time, keep diving.